So we're calling the meeting to order. You want to do the roll call?
Mr. David, Mr. Metzger, Mr. Haas,
Here.
Ms. Smith,
Here.
Mr. Wright, Mr. Meyer,
Here.
Ms. Shasta,
Here.
Mr. Johnson.
Here.
And there's Scott coming through the door. He's here.
A very nice sweatshirt on, or t-shirt, whatever it is. It's nice.
Okay, and has everybody had an opportunity to read the minutes? And if so, do we have any corrections or a motion to approve?
I move to approve.
And a second?
I second.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Those abstained? Okay, do we have any additions or changes to the agenda? Okay, with that, we'll jump right in with our first item, which is the 5-year pavement maintenance plan.
All right, so thank you very much for putting this on your agenda. We presented this one other time to the CIC about a week ago, and last time I took a little too long to introduce Murray Smith, so I thought maybe I'd start the presentation with the introduction of Murray Smith. Both Gabe Kropp and Troy Bowers have been helping us for probably, I've forgotten the timeline, 6 months now. We've been working on this plan, maybe a little longer than that. And so that's what we want to present to you today. It's still in draft form. It's not finalized. Part of the scope of work included some public involvement or public presentation, more like, than reaching out to the public, because this is a plan that we're not necessarily hoping to get votes for approval. It's based on hopefully solid engineering judgment and good understanding of our pavement system. So anyway, this is our 5-year plan. This is not our annual report. That's still on our agenda as something that needs to be completed and has yet to be completed for 2 years now. So this is a 5-year plan. It's a look ahead plan. It's a flexible plan, something that we can use to evaluate the work ahead of us instead of figuring it out the year of, and which should hopefully help with our planning a little bit. So we want to talk a little bit about the pavement maintenance utility fee and its history. We want to talk about our efforts to use what we know today for our plans for tomorrow, and our recommendations, and open it up for your questions at the end. So transportation utility fee, several of you were around when we adopted this fee. It was prior to 2007. We didn't have a pavement maintenance utility fee. We funded street maintenance through gas taxes, and that was it. And we didn't have much money to fund those needs. So there were several projects that were done, but they were done using urban renewal dollars, a little bit of gas tax revenue, and it was clear at the time, 2007, that we had a funding shortfall, a big funding shortfall. And the City Commission, I think, recognized that, and they asked the Public Works Department to put together a citizen committee and figure out what was the best option for how we would fund pavement maintenance. And we came up with this pavement maintenance utility fee. And so in 2008, the City Commission approved ordinance number 08-1007, establishing the pavement maintenance utility fee. And so in 2008, we started that. At the time, the recommendation was this: in order to adequately fund our pavement maintenance liability, we needed $1.5 million a year. We needed to start spending that $1.5 million a year. But the rate was high enough to where the City Commission felt like we should ramp up that rate. Started at about half of what we were expecting to collect and ramp it up over several years. So in 2008, we have both a commercial rate, a multifamily rate, and a single-family rate. So the single-family rate's the one that most people are familiar with, and it's the one that's easiest to explain. It's a monthly fee. Every single-family residence pays it. And in 2008, it was $4.50. And we collected about $600,000 from that first year of implementation. 2011, we're not topped out yet, but we're close to it. We're at $9 a month. And we collected last year $1,495,000, so almost $1.5 million. And we've got one more increase to go. And I didn't pull the number. I had it with me the other night, and I didn't bring that particular sheet for what we're supposed to collect. 1122. Thank you, Kathy. I wanted to reference our pavement management program. You know, we utilize Street Saver. Every 3 years we go out and we collect data. We have a consultant that does visual inspection of our pavements, and then he runs a report, and we get that report every 3 years. Some of you might remember the term Pavement Condition Index, or PCI. He sets the PCI based on his or that company's evaluation of our pavement program. Runs some funding scenarios, gives us another kind of a pavement report as well. So that's kind of been the software portion of it. But the other thing has just been, since 2008, we've done a fair amount of work. Right behind me are 3 maps, and probably at some point during a break, we'd like you to take a look at those 3 maps. But this one closest to me includes what we've done over since 2008 with regard to pavement maintenance. It includes our slurry seals, and our reconstruction work. So anything that falls kind of in that preventative maintenance or reconstruction kind of maintenance. I'm trying to remember, that includes this year's work as well. So take a look at that. We've done a lot over the last 3 years. We've also got an in-house paving program that's become very strong. This year we borrowed, Kevin and his crew worked on a program with, or not a program, a loan with equipment exchange with the city of Gresham, where we loaned them we've got a crack sealing machine. We loaned it to the city of Gresham, and in return they loaned us a couple operators and a milling machine, a small milling machine. And then we borrowed a roller from the city of Portland, a larger roller, just so that we could get good compaction. So all of that kind of comes together with our patchwork's gotten a lot better. I remember when we were out there with a dump truck and filling the holes the best we could, and now we're making sure we try and cut those out. And unless it's the dead of winter and we need to fill a hole, we're pretty much doing a much better job with what I think of as stopgap kinds of measures to fill those potholes before they become insurance claims. So there, I guess some of the streets that you might remember before and after would be Leland Road. Many of you have talked about that one. Mm-hmm. Warner Milne Road, even though that project got some funding, we used some pavement maintenance utility fee dollars for that. South End Road. There's been quite a bit of accomplishment there. Mary, I think the chip seal that we did on Warner Parrott, all those things are shown and are, I think, positive accomplishments. So take a look at that.
Thank you for Malala Avenue. That was great.
Malala Avenue this year, right?
Yeah, right in front of the station.
Yeah. So I think that's all I was going to go over on this. So the other thing we did in 2007 when we started talking about the fee was we did put together a commitment map. And that's similar to what we're doing here. Although this was much more involved, had much more thought with regard to some of the challenges that we've come up against over the first few years of this program. We've recognized that we need to plan a little better for utility improvements before we do the paving work, and not just kind of figure out what our utility needs are the year that we're trying to also throw together a paving project. knowing what our foundation looks like. We've got a good understanding of what the pavement condition looks like, but knowing what that road section really looks like has been a challenge for us. We're again out there trying to put together a paving project in January or March, depending on how on top of our pavement plan for that year is going, and at the same time trying to figure out, are we talking a thin overlay, or are we talking we really need to reconstruct this thing? So this plan is going to help us in a big way with those, because we'll have that 5-year look ahead, be able to do that. So again, helps us with foundation and helps us with underground utilities. And I think it helps the community better understand what's coming and when. So the plan itself is a document. It's it seems, for the most part, it talks a lot about the process of how we got to this map. Right? This map is what's the key to the plan. It gives by year, and this map is also it's the middle map on the wall here. So take a look at that one as well. But really, the plan for me is about getting a map, but it's also about documenting the process and how we got there, so that we can answer those questions. Because we really don't have enough money to cover all our needs. So there will be questions about why we're doing this street now instead of my own street. Or, that's usually the call. My street hasn't been maintained and I've been paying this fee for the last 5 years, and how come, you're not there? Well, our needs are much greater than our funding. Yet our funding is significant. I think, asking our citizens to pay a transportation utility fee is a new thing. Not every agency is doing it. So, we're trying to cover our needs, and we did a lot to. We looked quite a bit at budget considerations. So we looked at, if we had unlimited funding resources, what would that map look like? And so on the far map over here, there's a lot of red on it, but on that map, there's that is some results that came out of the Street Saver system that says, unconstrained funding, what would you fix within a 5-year period? And that's kind of what kind of results we got. Now that map, I want to disclose, is also trying to get our PCI from where it is today to an 80. So it's looking at a pretty high standard, and not too many agencies, especially with our history and age, have a PCI of 80. Our PCI right now sits at around 60. So it's a big leap, but it still shows, at optimum, because that's what the program goes for, is if you have a street at optimum, you're not necessarily reconstructing much. You're doing a lot more preventative maintenance, those treatments that are more cost effective. So good goal to shoot for. We're well short of that. I think the result of that run was a little over $32 million in a 5-year period. We're going to see something more like $7 million. Okay, so I think that's important to note, that while we've got a good financing structure, we've still got a lot of need out there. The other thing that I wanted to mention is, Gabe will cover these in much more detail, but this plan talks a lot about treatment types. Talks about utilities. We did have a fair amount of conversation with at least the city utility groups. Talks a little bit about special projects. There's 3 special projects shown on this map. One's Molalla, the other one's Pearl, and the third one's Division. And those projects stand out as special projects because they're a little bit more than pavement maintenance. There may be some right-of-way acquisition. There may be some geometric and geologic concerns there that are going to be problematic. Molalla Avenue, for instance, there's a whole Molalla Avenue plan. While we could do something like what we did on the southerly end of Molalla, there's really sidewalk enhancements, boulevard type treatments that are planned for those areas that we may or may not be able to fit in, and so this plan includes some overlay dollars for those special project areas, so that, Division Street, for instance, we know we've probably got to run in there and do some milling and paving, so we've included some dollars for that. But we also know that's not the ultimate fix for Division Street. So again, this plan looks at special projects. And then there is one item that we've heard before and we want to include, take the momentum that we have from this plan and present it to the City Commission, which would be a pavement moratorium on any streets that we do work on. Have an ordinance that would give us the strength to say, sorry, you can't cut into that street right now, despite what you might want to do to it or need to do to it. Or if you do cut into that street right now, here's the standard by which you're going to have to repair it. And it would be much stronger than our standard, which is more of a trench patch kind of a repair. I think that's it for that slide. So MSA's role has been critical for this in a lot of ways. Coordination of meetings with a lot of staff in Public Works, help us, put this presentation together. They've definitely brought ideas to the table that we wouldn't have thought about. They've taken a lot of the data that comes out of Street Saver, which sometimes isn't in a very user-friendly format, and they've turned it into a lot of these maps that you're looking at, and other maps and lists, and we've looked a lot at criteria that the Street Saver system doesn't consider. Things like bus routes, Street Saver doesn't consider bus routes. Neighborhoods, Street Saver doesn't really consider neighborhoods. Utilities, all those kinds of things. So, and I think a big thing is just kind of keeping staff focused on what we need to be focused on, instead of putting out fires here and there. And so they've been able to bring this along with us. They've looked at unit pricing for some of the unit costs that were in Street Saver. Carries a lot of unit costs with it, and so when you look at these budget scenarios, it grabs those numbers for, say, a square yard of asphalt or a square yard of chip seal or whatever. It goes out and grabs that information and uses it in its scenarios. And so we wanted to update that with this process, and so they brought a lot of the industry standard numbers to the table to help us kind of evaluate that. I mentioned meetings, meeting agendas, meeting notes, and then just putting this final document together. I mean, I think this will be good for us to refer to. It's, like I said, a working document, but it'll be something that we'll be able to refer to and go back and look at for at least the next 5 years. So, Gabe, I'm going to turn it over to you and go through yours.
Thanks, John. As a way to help kind of set the stage for what I'm going to talk about, which is more the technical side of the planning process, I thought I'd help clarify a couple of key terms that we use in the document, one of which is preventative maintenance. And so many of you probably already know what this means. It's a lot of the lower cost applications, the slurry seals, the crack sealing, of which the city has done a lot of in the past, and also includes some things like microsurfacing and spot repairs. Thanks, Troy. Because these are low-cost items, they're often things that the city can do pretty readily. There's not a lot of planning work that necessarily needs to be applied to the preventive maintenance work, because there's only certain streets that really qualify for those types of repairs. Streets that are early in their life cycle, relatively new, within 5 years or so after they've been put down. And that's compared to the rehabilitation work, which is more of the overlays, the grind and inlays, the full depth reconstruction type of work, which is a little bit more extensive. And this is really where we concentrated our efforts for planning with the city, because this is where most of the dollars do need to be applied. Ideally, agencies like the city would be able to get to a point where they can apply mostly preventative maintenance. But in the meantime, we do have an aging infrastructure, and the result of that is that a lot of these rehabilitation methods have to be used in the meantime to get those conditions back up. This is a graph I thought some of you might find interesting. It kind of shows the relationship of how pavements interact or age and how they degrade over time, and then what happens when you apply different types of treatments to them. If you're applying a preventative maintenance treatment in the first 5 years, for instance, it doesn't increase the condition of the pavement much, but what you can see is it really extends the life of the pavement, so you don't have to do as much later on. As compared to doing rehabilitation type methods later in the life cycle of the pavement, you have to do a lot more, invest more money to get it back up to where it was before. So we have streets that range in PCI, as John mentioned, quite a bit, all the way from pretty close to zero up to newly placed asphalt, and one would need to apply different types of treatments, the right treatment at the right time for those different types of pavements.
So just following this, the red line shows that an average street would last, looks like 15 years, 13 years?
And it really does vary depending on the type of street, whether it's asphalt, concrete. Yeah, and I think this is meant to show kind of the general relationship.
Okay.
So yeah, I think this is intended more for an asphalt type of street.
And the basic story here is the $2 looks like if you do $2 maintenance more often, you extend it to 26 years as opposed to one big repair. It's better to do. That's kind of what I got out of it. So
absolutely,
okay.
Yeah.
That's good, Blaine. That's what we wanted you to get out of that one, because that slide I don't think is necessarily specific to Oregon streets. Mm-hmm. So I would expect a much longer pavement age, but the idea would be early in the pavement life to start applying preventative maintenance, so that in Oregon City we've got good foundations. If we can keep those foundations dry, we can keep our native soils dry, those roads will last a very long time, and if they get wet, they don't.
Those costs are in square yards, just in case you're interested. So what we did, just the basic planning process steps, is we started with the city's pavement management software, StreetSaver, that John talked a little bit about. We really leveraged that to develop the initial project list, which we turned into a map, or the maps that you see over there. And then from there, we kind of took it the next step further by thinking of the additional criteria, the other things that are important to pavement that StreetSaver may not be taking into account. So StreetSaver is a good tool, but it has limitations, and it really can apply criteria that are general in nature, don't really take into account specific issues that have to deal with the city. We also did some utility coordination with the city's utilities, the storm, sanitary, and water folks, to make sure we were trying to coordinate that work with street work where possible, so that we weren't having to cut into the pavement immediately after doing some paving work. And we did some cost analysis throughout the process. I think John talked a little bit about that as well, making sure that costs are staying in line with what the city's budgets really are long term. And then ultimately what our recommendations are for the future and how to use this document kind of over the next 5 years. So the first step, StreetSaver, what it did, as I explained before, is it kind of gave us the initial project list, and it uses a lot of different pieces of information to kind of give us that starting list of projects. It uses the known pavement conditions of all the streets that the city gets through their regular inspections. It uses system-wide criteria to kind of develop the project list, things like street classification, lending more priority to the arterials, the collectors, as compared to the residential streets. It also has a bunch of prescribed treatment types that the city knows they like to use, the grind and inlays for the rehabilitation, or the slurry seals for the preventative maintenance, and it uses that along with known unit costs for each of those treatment types. You tell StreetSaver a particular budget, in this case $1.5 million each year for the city, and it'll spit out a list of projects that should hopefully be completed within that budget, and also tell it a time period, in this case 5 years, that you want to be able to do those projects. And we also did some other, we did several scenarios using StreetSaver. We assumed $1.5 million a year. We assumed an unconstrained scenario to kind of just see what the total work needs are going to be in the city, and we played with different time periods too to kind of get a feel for what the different outputs were that we could use to help refine this project list a little bit. So once we had that list, the next step was to meet with the city and kind of think, okay, well, what isn't Street Saver thinking of that we need to apply, the more specific criteria. So we brainstormed what those would be. One of the things, for instance, is known other future work. So there's other work going on in the city that Street Saver doesn't know about, and we don't want to be duplicating those efforts. Things like the work on Abernethy Road and the Jug Handle project down by Highway 213, I think is going to be done in the next few years. So we made sure to exclude any work that Street Saver may be calling for on those streets. John also mentioned the bus routes. Street Saver doesn't necessarily know where the buses are currently being routed in the city, so we looked at where the bus routes are at and how we could apply more criteria or more priority to those routes. Made sure we were excluding any non-city roads in case any of those crept into the Street Saver system, and the real key was institutional knowledge of the staff, Kevin, for instance, and John, and all the other public works staff that really know where the potholes are at. They know what the storm, drainage issues are, and if there's anything that would preclude doing the particular treatments that Street Saver would actually call for. So that was really important in making sure that each individual street that was on the list and on the map reflected reality and what really needed to be accomplished over the next 5 years. Using this additional criteria, we did a scoring system to kind of adjust the project list, move some projects around compared to what Street Saver was saying should be done, and then basically took it to the next step.
Hey, Gabe. Mm-hmm. So on that institutional knowledge, you all know Kevin Hanks. I think you all know Kevin Hanks and Matt Polison. They're both fairly new to the street division. So, a lot of this was a quick education and ramping up on it. It forced some field verification on us. It's like, here's your list. Does it, is it accurate, or is it giving you the right kind of results? And Street Saver, sometimes you got to question some of its results, and so this was a good opportunity for, I think, both Kevin and myself and Matt, and to really kind of go out there and kind of look at those street segments and figure out, this reality. Is this reality? The other little criteria you didn't mention, we put all the TAC members' houses on the streets to figure out what we're going to do. We did nothing like that. We didn't even put the mayor's. He caught that the other night. We didn't put his house on the list. But anyway, it's just it's that kind of criteria that it's meaningful that we used.
Out of curiosity, is the Street Saver program, is that something that the city owns, or is that something that you folks own?
Yeah, it's something that the city owns.
Okay.
Yeah.
We own a license for it. And,
all right.
Yeah.
So over time, it'll learn our city.
Well, we've been using Street Saver or the previous generation of Street Saver for years. I'm wanting to say we've got inspection data from the 80s.
Okay.
Maybe the 90s. I can't recall how far back it goes, but we've been using that for quite some time. The software changes more in terms of ease of entering the data. A lot of the algorithms that are used to predict what we should do haven't changed so much. And so it's a good planning tool that gets us close to more of that. How much money do you need over a certain period of time to fund your street programs? I think it's really good with that. But trying to get it to design or to establish what you need to do at a project level, it's not there. That's why verification is pretty important.
So,
John, you might want to mention that it is just a spot check. It's a sampling using judgment.
Right. So our inspections, we do those where we pay to have those done every 3 years. We don't pay the contractor to inspect 100% of our of each street segment. So every street in the city's in there, and many of those streets, especially the long ones, are cut into segments. So, and that's how the database tracks those, by segment. And for most of those segments, the contractor uses a percentage, and it's somewhere between 10 and 50% of that street segment that they actually document how many feet of cracks, how much square yardage of alligator pavement, how many trench cuts, those kind of things. They don't look at the full. They don't look at the full segment. They look at a portion of it. And like I said, it's somewhere on average between 10 to 50%. Nothing less than 10, maybe more than 50, but typically, if it's a real short segment, they look at the whole thing. If it's a longer segment, it's more like that 10 to 50% range. So it's a representative sample.
And it's pretty accurate, but the ground truthing that you guys went out and did is really important to verify.
Right. Yeah, thank you. I don't want to leave you with the impression that it's inaccurate information. It's just, especially in this process, it's been useful.
Software that just has certain limitations, and
Sure.
It's important to make sure it's giving you the product that you really want it to. So once we had a project list that we thought was pretty well developed, we put it through that process of applying that extra criteria to make sure it was a pretty good list. We took it to the next step, which was coordination with the city's utilities. So we met on a few occasions with the city's stormwater, sanitary sewer, and potable water staff to talk a little bit about what the utility needs are on those streets where pavement maintenance is needed. So the purpose of that was to try to see where there are opportunities to combine utility work with street work, or try to see if some of that work can't be done ahead of time before the pavement work is done, so that that investment that the city is making in the street rehabilitation is being maximized. So what we did during that process is we did end up adjusting a few projects to try to combine that work, but where the real value came in was documenting what all of those utility issues were, so that in the future the city could use that information over the next 5 years to be able to continue that coordination effort. A lot of those utility issues, whether they're leaky pipes or a storm sewer that needs to be installed to help drainage, they're issues that aren't necessarily funded yet, or a solution isn't quite known. So it's about documenting those so that they can be addressed later when pavement is actually rehabilitated on a year-to-year basis. So that's what we did as part of this, and it's all embedded within the project list document that the city is going to continue to manage.
Right. The only thing I'd add there is we didn't have, within the time frame of this project or the scope of this project, we used the data that we knew based on master plans or based on institutional knowledge. We didn't necessarily send video cameras out, for instance, to go look at pipelines. But this process identifies the projects, so we know we'll be able to get out way in advance and kind of determine, does this storm sewer line need to be replaced. So we did our best based on the information that we had, but we know that there's more work to be done before we actually scope out each of these projects.
So we did most of our coordination with the public utilities. The private utilities will get an opportunity to see the finalized document and then continue their coordination work with the city to make sure their utilities are similarly addressed before pavements are updated. And part of that coordination effort will also be in tandem, I think, with the pavement moratorium policy that the city will likely be pursuing here and in the near term as well. So the cost analysis kind of throughout the project, John mentioned that we started by evaluating the treatment type unit costs that StreetSaver used to make sure they were using realistic numbers that were up to date, and so that when they were calculating what projects could be done, they weren't being overly optimistic or pessimistic, for that matter, in terms of what can realistically be done. We also, throughout the whole process, as we were adjusting projects up and down the list, adding projects, subtracting projects, using the priorities, that the overall needs were matching up with the budget, or the revised project list was matching up with the budget. We also came up with recommendations for special projects that John mentioned. There were 3 projects in particular that really have needs beyond the scope of the PMUF dollars that are allocated, and are really going to take separate funding to address those issues. And then we were always looking to try to pare those costs or pare the projects back using the priorities that we had developed through this process. As John mentioned, there's a lot more need than funding, as is typically the case. So we really relied on those extra priorities that we developed in the process to help figure out what the highest priority projects were. And then on a year-to-year basis, try to do our best to balance the projects as best as possible, recognizing that most of the projects tended to be front-loaded in the next few years, since there's typically more work that needs to be done early in the process as compared to in successive years. This is a bit of a summary of kind of what the cost situation is. The top table are what the projected revenues are going to be. You'll see about $1.5 million a year starting in 2013. So $7.4 million over the course of 5 years is what's projected to be available to spend on pavement maintenance work, and that's going to be for both your preventative maintenance and your rehabilitation work, so everything. And then the bottom table is what we currently estimate will be the costs based on the current project list that we developed. So you can see there's still a little bit of an imbalance there, and with the intent of the plan to be flexible in nature, we didn't feel the need to get everything down to exactly a certain amount, knowing that there will be some adjustments made kind of on a year-to-year basis anyway. So you can see that there's still a little bit of a difference too in terms of total cost compared to what the anticipated revenues are going to be. And so part of that, as you'll see, one of our recommendations later is to take another look at this plan in the 4th year to see how we're doing overall, see if that gap is getting bigger, if it's closing. Hopefully it's closing, and you're able to get done a lot more work than what we've estimated.
And this is based on the street saver and the as to when things need to be done, and so it looks like you have a shortfall of $200,000 in 2012, and in 2013 is a $900,000 shortfall.
Yeah, that's what's estimated based on the project list that we ultimately came up with. The one that Street Saver started, and the one that we tailored based on the criteria that the city and us combined.
Some of the projects usually happen in a calendar year, and sometimes we bridge that with our fiscal year. So that's that big shortfall, that 2.4, is something that we'll have to make adjustments for. The other thing that we're kind of not sure about is how our utility fees for water, sewer, storm will keep pace with our pavement list. So, we've got master plans for most of those utilities. Some are a little older than others, but for instance, our water utility, we're facing a water utility rollback that's pretty significant in 2014. If that were to happen, all of a sudden we'd have street money, pay for pavement, no utility money to fix the water lines underneath them. And so how does that play into this? And that's where that flexibility kind of comes into play, and that's where, to me, I see that 7.4 difference, the difference between 9 million and 7.4. There may be some projects. I'm more hoping that we can find economies in some of these projects to cover that gap. But there may also be some utility things that kind of, we have to strike that particular pavement project because we've got a bigger utility need than we can afford to build.
2016 looks nice, though.
Yeah, yeah.
There may be a balance of projects by the time you get to 2016 that you may not be able to complete in previous years. So,
yeah.
we'll hopefully
I like a positive thought.
Just a couple of points I thought I'd mention too. You'll see that the real variable part of this table is the rehabilitation work. We have a constant $200,000 for pavement maintenance plugged in there, and we're still finalizing that list. And then $200,000 a year also for special projects. And the intent of that 200,000 isn't that it's actually spent each year on those three projects that we mentioned, but that it really be a cumulative buildup of funds that could be used as like some seed money for potentially doing one of those projects in the future if other funding becomes available. Those projects are certainly going to cost more than a couple $100,000 a year. So, but it's a planning mechanism that we're trying to, with the city, recommending that be done so that something can be used in the future, hopefully, to address all those needs for those projects. So, just to conclude and summarize what our recommendations were with this plan is really to use this document that we're developing as a working project list, that it's flexible. And John hit on this earlier, that intentionally want to include flexibility so the city has the ability to adapt. We know conditions change. Sometimes streets degrade faster or not as fast as what we think they're going to. Sometimes you have a water main break or leaky storm drains that change things. So the intent is for it to be a working project list. Also, the list has suggested treatment types in it. So you'll see up on the map over there that we have a year identified for particular streets. It doesn't show a suggested treatment type, but that's actually in the list. That's not shown on the map. They vary from preventive maintenance treatments to grind-in inlays to overlays to full-depth reconstruction, and that's all included in the list, and that's going to need to be confirmed each year as well, that those are still appropriate. Some of the rehabilitation may need some extra pavement design work, like the full-depth reconstruction sections, for instance. For utility projects, our recommendations are to come back to this plan each year to see what the utility issues are for those streets that need to have pavement work done to them, see if there's anything more that can be done to address those utility needs. And there are some long-term planning interests for some of the major streets that the city will continue to coordinate as well. Special projects were already mentioned and discussed at length, that there's 3 projects, one on Division, one on Pearl, one on Malala, that will likely need to be addressed in the future for comprehensive upgrades. In the meantime, there is money in there in the plan to do at least an overlay on those streets in the near term to address some of the pavement issues that are there now. We've also made a recommendation to the city that they pursue implementing a pavement moratorium policy, essentially to restrict cutting of the pavement 5 years or so, give or take, with it after certain rehabilitation has been done to those streets to maximize the city's investment there. And there's really, since this plan has included a lot of planning with the utilities, it seems like that's a reasonable thing to do in parallel with this plan. And then also for future updates, in about 4 years, we recommended coming back to this plan, seeing how we're doing, and possibly doing another update for the next 5 years at that time.
Last week when you presented this, you held up the draft report. I don't know if you brought that with you this time.
Yeah.
Did you bring it?
I've got it. If you're interested in looking at the draft report, this is it right now. It's not too thick yet. I don't think it's going to get any thicker. Most of it's appendices, so it's about a 10-page long report for the most part, with a bunch of appendices that kind of outlines the process, some of what we're presenting here, with just a little bit more detail. And I think the intent is to make that available once it's finalized to the public. And just to conclude, we just wanted to mention that the PMUF is an important funding tool. John mentioned, or really described the need for it, and we seem to think it's doing its job. Based on the street saver projections, the street condition in the city is projected to at least stay the same and hopefully increase just a little bit over the next 5 years. So without it, I don't think they'd be able to do nearly as much and keep that PCI up as high as it can be.
Yeah, we're definitely trying to catch up. A lot of I think 3 years to let it go. The other thing I want to mention is this middle map, the map that shows the recommendations for the next 5 years, is specific to the reconstruction work. So there's also the preventative maintenance piece, and we are we didn't want to really drill down into what that should look like until we had a pretty solid understanding what we're going to do with the rehabilitation. And, the numbers obviously there's a lot more money that goes into the reconstruct. So we know we're going to spend about $1 million in preventative maintenance over the next 5 years. And we do have a draft map, but it's not shown reflected here. The reason why I think it's important is because I know as people look at this map, there's going to be certain neighborhoods that don't look like they're getting much of anything. And the reality of that is they're likely going to get a lot more preventative maintenance in some of those neighborhoods. It's going to get more reconstruction work. So that's a whole other kind of map that'll be important to show you, but it's not ready yet. Okay.
John, I know we were told years ago when the utility fees started what the rating of the roads were at that time. Currently, you're saying they're 60, and our goal is to get them to 80. Do you remember what they were before we had the fee?
I think they were right about the same. They were maybe a little bit higher, 63 maybe. And I think we've dropped mostly because we started the funding at about half of what we needed. So, we lost some ground there, but I think we've recovered some of that with some of the economies that we've done with some of the pavement, both in-house and in the contract work. But some of the problem that I have with the PCI is, again, it's a little bit subjective. We've got a company that comes in and they look at those every year, but sometimes I see some of the ratings and I'm not, it'll look good one year and, we won't have done much to that. And, 3 years later when they were inspected, it's quite a bit lower. So I always struggle with that PCI number. And I know a lot of people kind of hang their hat on it, but I think we're improving. I mean, just from an observation of driving conditions, I know the street segments are looking a lot better than they have in the past. So.
I was curious, from the street saver first step to the recommendation, is there like an average time, all the analysis and meetings and?
I think it was about a 6-month process from the time we kind of had our first meeting to where we are today.
Yeah.
Maybe slightly longer.
I think we were scheduled to, press that a little quicker, but to be quite honest with you, it's been city, my time and our effort to kind of verify a lot of the street saver findings. That wasn't necessarily Murray Smith's scope of work to go out and do, but with our own workloads, it's just, hey, we need your feedback, and we hadn't had time to get to it, so there's been some delay, but I think it's made good progress. It's just been a little slower than we had originally hoped.
I was just curious.
So that's really all. We just wanted to present it to you, and look for any feedback that you have. Feel free to take a look at these maps and let me know via email what you're thinking. That's fine. So.
Excellent. Do we have any questions?
Well, the only thing you say is when the utilities or somebody cuts the pavement, Beaver Creek phone cut the pavement on Malala Avenue and went down Warner Milling. Whatever they used to pave that back, they did a good job on that spot.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Because they cut a small trench, but then they went back wider and did a real good patch job. It seemed like it held up well.
Yeah, I agree with you. That was a standard. We made them follow a standard because of the kind of project that well exceeded what we typically would require. So we actually asked them to just cut the road at whatever width they needed it, do a full depth patch, but then come back, after they'd done about half the project and mill down a full 7-foot wide, milling machine width, and then pave all that back. And that's why that trench has lasted the way it has.
I've noticed wherever there's a bus route, there's a lot of cracked pavement, especially in front of Jackson and Division Street. It just seemed like you could get some federal dollars through TriMet or something to help us.
That'd be nice.
Instead of laying steel down for a little bit, maybe lay some
Yeah. No, buses have a huge impact, more so than garbage trucks. Buses are significant. So with this list, there's some new technology that's out there with how to evaluate pavements without tearing them all up, and we plan to use some of that to get a better understanding of what that existing road section looks like. Because we've made some assumptions based on some cores in the past, and they don't always turn out to be right. You can't core everywhere, and there's a lot of variety from one end of a street segment to the other, at least in our case. That's what we found. So.
Excellent.
Great.
Thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Okay, moving on. Public event road closures.
So this is, Betty, this came up just because of your concerns about the parade.
Right, because I called Mary that night also, and she wondered too. Why was
Right. So, we've probably missed that before. I don't know if in years past we've given updates on the parades or the events that do road closures, but we probably should. So we're going to try to stay on top of that.
It was the one that came down Lynn Avenue to it was
Homecoming for the high school.
Yeah, it was
Right, the homecoming parade.
Right.
So we missed that one. The other, Kathy, I'm drawing a blank here on the road closures. Oh, that's right. Okay, so in December.
Teddy Bear Parade. Yeah.
Right, but the one that's coming up. So we'll try and give you an update on events that are coming up for the next month or two. And the only one that we could think of was the tree cutting ceremony, or not the tree cutting, the tree lighting ceremony, which is the first Saturday in December. That'll be Main Street, and I think they close it from 10th to, well, they close it at 10th, and so vehicles aren't allowed. Or no, they close it at 9th. Right, and 9th Street. So might be a little challenging this year with the two-way conversion on how we're going to do that. But that's the only road closure that I know of that's going to happen for the remainder of this year. So, and we'll try and do a little better job at that, Betty, because that parade route. I think we talked a little bit about the parade route this year. I think we've also in the past put some kind of signage up beforehand that said expect delays on this particular street. It's pretty short, but it still can be an inconvenience when you're trying to get
Well, I
on.
had never run into it before, all the years that I've lived in Oregon City. And it was like...
They have it once a year.
Yeah. Next time I'll go and watch. I heard it's great.
Okay, two-way Main Street is coming fall of 2011.
Right. So you've seen some of the banners, and I think you're well aware of this. That's coming. The goal was to get that done this week, and there was some complications with both trying to deal with restriping Main Street when we've got temperatures and dry pavement that would accommodate striping, and then dealing with the on-street parking so that we don't have. Right now, if you've driven down Main Street, there's parallel parking on both sides. So when we stripe it two-way and we go to that conversion, there's going to have all these cars parked along the railroad side of Main Street, or the east side of Main Street. So that I didn't. Kathy, you may have a little bit more to contribute, but it's just something that we didn't get. We had great weather last week. Would have been nice to get it done, but the contractor wasn't quite ready. This morning, they were planning to try it, and they had fog. They made a call at 8 o'clock and said they weren't sure if they were going to have the temperatures or the dry pavement that they needed, so they've just delayed it. And now we're worried that we're going to be into wet weather. Kevin tells me we might even have snow. So we're going to get to the two-way conversion when we can. Okay.
Well, now when they do the conversion, they're taking out the parallel part, the the pull-in parking, right?
The diagonal parking's already been kind of, it's been painted. I think people have stopped parking in diagonal. I know the first couple of days we had a little bit of both going on, but now everything's painted for parallel parking.
Hey, transportation issues.
Is this one mine too, Kathy? Signal timing.
It's mostly just with our information.
Yeah. So there's some email correspondence in here, I'm thinking. You folks are well aware of the problems at 213 in Caulfield and Glen Oak Road with traffic delays during peak hours. We've received several complaints using our citizen request system, which is pretty. I don't know if you've used it yet, but it's a pretty good system. You can go online and express any complaint or any. Doesn't have to be a complaint. It could be any thought that you want. But we've taken a few complaints on that with regard to this intersection. So it continues to. We don't see an easy solution there. That's the problem. We've talked to ODOT about it. It's not one that we're going to be able to fix with signal timing, and that seems to be the feeling of many out there, that we could fix that with signal timing. But it's just a capacity problem. We've got, that's where the road goes from 3 or 4 lane section to 1 lane in each direction and a center turn lane. So, and to change that's going to require. There's the creek that runs through there. There's also the intersection, on the Glen Oak Road leg of that intersection. I think even as far back as when they decided to put the high school in, that intersection was suggested it needed to be larger, and it didn't happen. So that's kind of what we're dealing with, and I just thought maybe we'd pass that along to you so that if you kind of get complaints or hear from people about that concern. Right now, other than communicating with ODOT to maybe put it on a list, make sure it's on there, make sure they're aware that there's some concerns there. That's, I think, the best we can do, because it is an ODOT facility.
It's an ODOT, yeah.
The vision of, this is another one, vision obstruction. Ron, this is something I think you brought up at Leland and McCord. That we did talk to the county about that, and they have sent the property owner a violation notice or a request to
Move the shrubs.
Not remove, but to trim the shrubs down. So usually if they don't remove them, it's always going to be kind of a maintenance problem that we'll have to kind of keep an eye on. But they sent me a copy of the letter, and I drove through there Monday and hadn't seen any change, but I expect to see some more there, so thought I'd pass that along. That's it.
I'm impressed with how responsive the county was.
Yeah?
Very responsive.
I did have one question. I don't know if this would be something we would look into, but the post office on Molalla, when you come out of that post office, and if you're to the right, talk about bushes, they're kind of high. And I pulled out, and I was going to turn right, and I almost took out a bicycler who was right on the sidewalk. But, you can't. And then tonight, when I was coming to this meeting, I pulled out of the post office, saw someone else almost do the same thing. So didn't know if that's something that we would look at.
Was that on, is that on their property, or is that the fire station?
The bushes are on their property, best I can tell.
Is it their driveway?
It's their driveway.
Okay.
Yeah.
How's that project coming along there? Changing that around? Is that a 2 or 3 year project to come out on First Street? And you won't be coming back out on Molalla Road? That the mailboxes will be moved, like if you drove around the corner and to the side?
Tell us about it.
Oh, you don't know?
I'm not following that one. You mean at the post office
Instead
itself?
of the mailboxes being where they're at right now, which causes a lot of problems, especially if you're behind somebody and you want to go home like you might want to go home, turn left, it's impossible for quite a while because the traffic just never stops. Well, I don't know where I can't remember where I got this, but they're going to take that and put the mailboxes back in the back there a little bit, on the side. You know, if you come around the straightaway going out, and there's a couple of different scenarios in what they're doing, and it's not going to happen right now in one way. They're going to do a little bit at a time, and pretty soon you'll come back out on First Street. You'll go in there and come on First Street, and you got a choice of going right to Beaver Creek Road or turning left and having the same problem you got now, but turn left. But that's what.
I hadn't heard that, but it sounds like a good idea because I know that during peak hour, Malala is a tough one to cross.
Very bad.
So it does sound like a
like
good
you said,
idea.
it's even bad to turn right.
Yeah, turning right's really.
Can I make a suggestion? On all of your workstations, I do have a card about the TSP update, and we really want to highly encourage all citizens to go to that webpage and input any comments or concerns you have. We have an article, we're going to have an article in the Trail News, but we want to hear from citizens about problems that need to be corrected. So there's eventually going to be an interactive map on there. So for instance, you could go on there and click on that Leland and Myers Road intersection and say brush needs to be cleared here. I mean, that may not be a TSP item, but but it'll at least they'll be able to compile a list of what things need to occur.
Is that the same as the citizen request system?
No.
No. Okay.
This is specifically to transportation. The citizen request system that John was talking about, I think it's called like Oregon City Outreach or something. And I have an app on my phone. There's an app for that, and that one is there's multiple categories you can submit questions, and you can submit transportation questions.
Got it.
So, Blaine, we're gonna look. We'll call the post office and just let them make sure they're aware of that concern. They're pretty good about letting us know when they have that concern. So it'd be nice to turn that around for them.
Okay, moving on to elections of officers. We have 2 positions we need to fill, the chair and the vice chair. We had nominations last month for Blaine Meyer for the chair and Betty Schaffsma for the vice chair. Do we have any additional nominations for chair? Going once, going twice. Okay, do we have any additional nominations for the vice chair? And all is quiet. Okay. Those in favor of Blaine Meyer for chair for the next year, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Those abstained? Congratulations.
Thank you.
Those in favor of Betty Schaffsma for vice chair, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Those abstained? You have new officers. Congratulations, Blaine and Betty.
Thank you.
They'll get better pay than you did.
They get
I hope so.
100% increase.
Big benefits.
Okay, and from there we have our construction projects, which are the same updates we have been having, just the stuff that's in the packet, right? Or did you have something that, John looks busy?
John did an Arch Bridge tour
Oh,
today.
neat.
And we wanted to show you a few pictures. But there is a construction update list that I had on your services, and I think that John was going to go ahead and maybe review this tiny bit.
Well, it was kind of Kevin and I did it together, and I just took some pictures. A lot of them didn't turn out great, but some of them were pretty good.
I know they were down there working last weekend.
There you go.
So I'll just talk through it. I'm not going to be able to explain everything because I don't have the terminology right. I'm definitely not a structural engineer, but it was definitely interesting to just see it. So I'll just describe them, and I figured you'd be interested in seeing some of the pictures up close. So here you go. I didn't put a lot of planning into this. I just told Kathy, I said, maybe I can show them a few photos. So this is from the West Lynn side of the bridge looking towards Oregon City, and I'll tell you that the scaffolding that's underneath the bridge is pretty impressive just in itself. It felt very solid and safe, and surprisingly, despite how kind of rickety it looks from the driver's perspective, it functions very well. This picture is one of the worst ones that I had, but I was wanting to show it to you. These are the seismic retrofit components, and they're not hooked up yet, but they've installed these big gussets, if you will, and then there's one. Well, there's several of these, but at each beam, there's one of these that's installed, and that cable eventually will string through another girder, and will just prevent that. If there's any lateral movement, the idea is to prevent it from falling off that girder. So they're large. The picture doesn't do it justice, but they're really pretty significant. So it just emphasized to me that we're looking at seismic upgrades on this bridge as well. Just another picture that's kind of looking back at West Lynn. The pipeline that you see there is West Lynn's wastewater pipeline. There's a sewer pipeline, a gas pipeline, and telecommunication conduits. And
That's the old water line, I think.
the old water line, I believe, has been removed, and now they're in conduits. It used to be all those telecommunication. That's what we heard today from the inspector, was that they run the old water line. And then, of course, up above that is the pedestrian walk, so walkway. So that's, again, much of that's being rebuilt as well.
So this big white tube that has three different things inside of it?
No, this right
That's
here,
all wastewater.
This is all West
Okay.
Lynn's wastewater.
Got it. Okay.
It comes across the bridge, and I don't know if you know this, but Water and Environment Services has a large interceptor that runs along the seawall on the Oregon City side, and that's the West Lynn wastewater drops into that. Many of you have probably seen this, but that's on the West Lynn side. A lot of the materials and equipment that they're using. They've got quite a can't see it because it's kind of behind the railing in this picture, but they've got they're using high pressure water to wash the grout off the structure itself, and so just how they treat that water goes from several settling basins and pumps and pipes, and eventually ends up on the Oregon City side in a final place where they treat it, discharge it to the sanitary system. This is just a picture. Kevin and I decided this guy's got probably one of the worst jobs in the city right now. He's using high pressure water, like 4,000 psi, to remove the grout from the steel. And so they were doing quite a bit of that while we were there. Usually they have 3 of these guys doing their thing. I think today we saw 2. We saw 1. The other machine was being worked on, but they're removing 100% of that grout off. That kind of diagonal-looking square box there, if you will, is the arch itself. Thank you, Troy. So this piece right here is. Oh, that's why I don't use that. This piece right here, everybody turns around and goes. That's the arch. That's the top of the arch, but underneath the bridge. So again, and we're on the West Lynn side. So a lot of this stuff has been removed. You can see the steel rivets that they use. Those are all rivets. Those little things right there. And the interesting thing is they're inspecting each and every one of those rivets, and some of them you can tell have rusted away, and they had a little what do you call it, a little measuring device that the engineering group had developed, and so if if they could slide that thing over the rivet without it hanging up on the rivet, then they felt like there was enough of it deteriorated that it needed to be replaced. So,
John, isn't there some show called Dirty Jobs? Get them out here.
Contact Mike Rowe.
There you go.
they did a lot of this removal inside those arches because there's enough room for a man to get around in the arch, although small man. And they did. They did a lot of this work inside, or they've done a lot of this work inside those arches already.
So the debris all that falls into the water, and then they just kind of put those barriers around it and collect
Well,
it?
it doesn't. They've got containment, so they've got some containment plastic that kind of keeps it. And then, of course, those barges are sitting underneath those areas, and then they try to contain it on the scaffolding as much as they can as well. But it's not intended to fall into the river.
Right.
These are just some gussets that they installed on some of the beams that had signs of deterioration that needed support. So there's a plate like this and bolts through it on either side of that beam. They said that they were several of them had a fair amount of rust. This is grout this is the old grout that's been sprayed on the beams. This is kind of the mesh work that helps hold that grout to the beam. And so, again, they're going to peel a lot of that off and replace it, most of it. So that work is still kind of yet to happen. But structurally, this is much stronger than that original web on the right.
That's the conduit down there.
Yeah, there's those new conduits that I think used to be in the water line. This picture is pretty much looking straight down on the Westland side. They said this was the old coffer dam that they left in place when they built the original bridge footings, and so they're still there.
Oh, we darn.
Kind of interesting. Today they wouldn't let us leave those things in place, or at least that visible. These are just again. This is the sewer pipe, and this is the structure that supports the pathway or the sidewalk up above it. Any of these fittings or exposed metal, all that's planned for replacement if it has to go back at all. Again, this is the arch itself underneath the deck where they've removed all that, and all these rivets are inspected. This is Kevin right here. He's got his head up inside one of 3 access points. So there's a little hole. It's really not much bigger than this. Right here, there's that one. There's one up on the top of the arch, which we didn't get to see, and then there's the one on the Oregon City side. This is the one on the Westland side, and you look up in there, and I couldn't get my camera to flash, but there's gussets every 5 feet that kind of span from top to bottom inside the arch, and there's maybe a 24-inch hole that's cut in each of those gussets, and at the top. In the one gusset, it'll be at the top of the gusset, and the next one, 5 feet away, it'll be at the bottom of the gusset. And I'm not. I guess I don't remember asking him why that was, but that's how the workers had to get. They had to climb in one and climb into the other and up and down. And if they needed, air equipment, they had to deal. Like I said, it had to be a small guy because. I don't think we could have climbed through that hole right there if we had.
Doesn't look like Kevin would fit real well there.
So yeah, and they've been doing a lot of work in those areas. In fact, they talked to us about some lead paint on some things inside there that they were addressing somehow with some coverage and some removal techniques. So pretty interesting stuff. I mean, these pictures really don't do it justice. There's a lot to this project, really. This is the sidewalk deck, and there's some rebar here that was really, typically we'd like to see 2.5 to 3 inches of cover of concrete or bury, if you will, so that the rebar is set from the surface 2.5 to 3 inches. Typically, in today's standards, this is nearly at the surface. So they're going to be redoing all that, and that was just an interesting shot. We're just seeing again some more metal work and form work for some of the new things. This was I forget his last name, but Dave. He's the. Do you know his name, Scott? He's the ODOT inspector. Did a great job giving us a tour and invited us back. So if you're interested, we could probably get another tour from him. More scaffolding and looking at the Oregon City side.
Do you want to go?
Sure.
That would be cool.
This piece here is it's kind of hard to explain, but you'll see a picture in the future that there's a plate underneath here that so we've got this arch, and then there's some support bars that basically hold the deck up, right? So those support bars come off the arch down through the deck, and then there's probably a 6 or 8 inch piece of steel that those bars are threaded through that kind of hold up these beams, and that's the existing grout and the condition of the existing grout, and all that will be removed and replaced, and they'll do all the inspection underneath it, but it looked pretty bad. And it didn't look like it was necessarily it didn't look like they had made it look like that from the reconstruction. It looked like it had just deteriorated that way. So I thought that was kind of cool. I should have rotated this. No, that is rotated. That's rotated the correct way. Sorry. More of the new metal work that they're doing, again, out towards the edge of the bridge. So this is going to help better support the pedway. I think if you're a pedestrian, you're going to be a lot safer than you were 6 months ago. This is another cool feature. On the Oregon City side, I don't know if you noticed, but under the bridge there's what looks kind of like the extension of the arches where they go down into the basalt rock on the Oregon City side. Mm-hmm. And really, between the two arches, there's on the Oregon City side, it's an enclosure. And this is a terrible picture. I recognize that, but it does give you a sense. Right in this area, these are actually wooden stairs. They said the original wooden stairs were still left in there, and so you can get all the way down into the bottom of that. And there's drain holes in the bottom of that structure, so that when the river level comes up, it actually fills this area, and when it drops down, I mean we're well near the top of the bridge, so it never gets that high, but. When the river comes up, it fills that area and then it drains back down again. But all these cross braces are structural steel covered with grout. They covered all that, and it goes down quite a ways. I mean, we just peeked in there and tried to take a picture of it, but it's a pretty cool little spot.
You know that those larger areas, many years ago, I was quite young, but there are restrooms in them.
It looks like it.
Both the big ends.
I'll show you those. It's not exactly this area, but you're right. Both of those ends have bathrooms.
I heard a couple kids slid down inside there once.
What's that?
So a couple kids went down inside
It
there.
reminds me.
When they repainted the bridge back in the 70s or 80s,
Wouldn't surprise me.
and they left the trap door open up there, and they had to have the fire department pull them out.
This is just, all the railings, everything that you see kind of in this area here, this is all being reconstructed off-site and will be reinstalled when the bridge is complete. There's one of those. That's the women's bathroom. And then there's the men's. And there was bathrooms on the Oregon City side and the Westland side. I wish I could remember the story as to why they put those in there, but they closed them pretty quickly because of vandalism. And so, but
These were public restrooms.
they were public restrooms. Yeah.
They were still open in the 50s.
I'm not sure why they would. We were kind of wondering, why would you put a restroom on a bridge like that? Why wouldn't you put it, somewhere else? But anyway, they decided that
All the
wasn't the
people
right
living
place.
under the bridge.
I don't know. No.
Couldn't make it across.
All the fixtures were gone, but yeah, the walls were still there. In fact, the contractor's using one of them as kind of a not a staging area. He's got some tools and things in there. So anyway, again, just a shot back at West Lynn. Just the shoring alone is kind of unique. That's the bridge deck. I remember early on they asked if we could allow pedestrians to continue to cross the bridge. And there's really
Not a
nothing,
good idea.
nothing safe. This again is the section before they spray the grout on the arch.
Is that the old piece? Is that old or brand new?
This is all original.
Old.
A lot of the steel they said was perfect condition. So,
It didn't rust.
Oh.
They said it was perfect.
so, I don't know if you remember that crumbly looking piece, but these are those beams, or not beams. Basically, they're the tension rods that support the bridge deck from the arch itself. And I don't quite understand this piece, but they're going to remove all of this concrete and re-pour all of that. They said they're going to pour it back 6 inches from where it is now. So you know how narrow it is. It's not going to get much wider. It can't get any narrower where the arches are, and the arches are right on the edge. So if you remember those little rubber bump outs, they'll still be there, but at least between the two arches, there'll be another 6 inches in each lane that your mirrors can hopefully appreciate.
John, did they refer to
It sure narrowed up between the time I was 18 and
It is
now.
a suspension bridge.
Just
I
with that
don't remember what they called
Georgia
them.
Crown for a while. I used to put it in a floorboard going up there. Now white knuckle
Or
almost.
suspenders.
So will the sidewalks be cut back 6 inches, or
I
will they
lost the
stay the
mirror
same?
once on that.
Huh? Oh yeah.
No, I think the curb stays the same.
Truck or a
Bus
bus.
is coming at you.
They've exposed all of this on each one of these. I don't recall the reason for why they were doing that, but they were really kind of focusing on this joint here and how to remove the sidewalk. And like you said, each of these will be removed 100%. All the concrete will come out, and then they'll re-pour those.
They probably figured that was a likely point of corrosion because of the flat deck there with the sidewalk. Probably want to make sure they had it well covered. I understand that they used mortar instead of paint back when they designed this because of the hydrogen sulfide coming out of the two pulp and paper mills and just a highly corrosive atmosphere back then. Seems to have done a good job.
Knowing what we know about earthquakes after our community forum, how safe is all of this concrete on the bridge? How safe is this bridge if it's...
I can't answer that.
Doesn't matter.
Don't be on the bridge.
That's the other experts.
Yeah. But don't be on a bridge in an earthquake.
Just try not to be on the bridge when the earthquake hits.
Anyway, this is just another deck photo that I thought was kind of interesting for some reason. It looks like we got about 12 inches of fall. There's about 12 inches of lift on this front tire, and that truck's, I don't know, 25 feet long. There's a lot of slope from one end to the other. That's it.
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
Who's that?
I don't know.
That's your daughter, John.
Very good.
Is that Rachel?
Oh, no, that's Carly. My
Carly? Yeah, your daughter,
Sorry. I'm logged on with me over there.
Kathy has a Carly. Can I have it?
Mine's younger.
Okay, so are we going to have any other updates on the construction projects, or we have materials? How did you want to handle that?
Yeah, I think, there's not a whole lot in terms of updates other than what's in the package.
Okay.
You see that ODOT had the bid opening for the Main Street project, the phase 1, 5th to 10th Street. I mean, you might think, haven't we already done all the work? But now this is the sidewalk replacement, and what else are they doing, John? Sidewalks and street lights and parking meters, new parking meters. And so anyway, we have the information, the bid.
I think so this is an award. Last meeting we.
So it was awarded to this company. On Main Street.
Yeah, the low bidder, this is the second low bidder, although it wasn't that much high. It was actually very close. The low bidder defaulted. They didn't want the bid, apparently. They didn't turn in the right forms.
Okay, but now we have a
This
contractor to do this.
Yeah,
Because
and
this has been
construction
awarded.
begins in January and has to be done before before the bridge reopens.
Okay.
So, I guess just for those viewers that don't have this information, Nutter Corporation was awarded a $1.8 million contract for that second. Oh, we're still calling that phase 1?
Yeah.
Okay, so the second piece of the phase 1 part of Main Street. And then Kathy was telling me that phase 2, which is defined as Main Street from 10th to 15th, a new grant application for federal flexible funds was submitted fairly recently. When did that go in, Kathy? I don't see that here.
October 20th.
October 20th.
Yeah, I have new version.
For $2,045,628. Is that what's on? Yeah, that's what's on the application.
Who writes those grants?
Actually,
Grant requests?
well, a few staff members worked on it, and it was submitted by Nancy Kraushaar. And Lloyd Purdy, downtown, Main Street downtown, he helped a lot with that.
We should know in 3 to 4 months.
We got one for, I think we got some flexible funds for the first phase.
Yes.
We're not overly confident we'll get any for the second phase, but doesn't hurt to put in an application.
You never know unless you ask.
Right.
And we have a water master plan update on the 21st. Here?
Everybody, yeah.
Here at 7 o'clock. So hopefully we're overlaying these plan updates so that we
Yeah, transportation, water, sewers coming.
And have we heard any more about transportation? I know I responded to the email to be on the TSP.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything more.
Yeah, I think right now it's in. Staff is reviewing various chapters just to kind of make sure that they look appropriate to even share with the committees. And right now we're working on. We skipped chapter 4, got chapter 5 that was due today. So we need to. If you want to review those, you're going to need to allocate some time. And there's a lot.
when
Seems
the
like a
time
lot.
gets shorter
Seems like a
as
lot of
we're
community
not getting
interest
started.
too. There's a lot of people that are interested in that. As we go to different meetings, I hear from other people that are pretty interested.
Well, kind of my assumption was that, we get a date for a meeting, and from there, then it would kind of drive us to study up before we hit the meeting. But
I think there will be plenty of time. I'm not trying to indicate that you're going to be rushed there. I just, recognize that there's going to be some work involved in doing an adequate review of that.
The work is definitely started.
Yeah.
It's behind the scenes now.
So once the staff's kind of up to speed on it and feeling good about it, then they'll ask us to join in some of those meetings. And
Right.
okay.
Yeah, kind of like the plan we're submitting. We don't want to necessarily float something out there that might have, glaring mistakes or obvious kind of things that leave the impression we don't know what we're doing. So, yeah.
Okay, so that seems to be it. Kathy brought in some refreshments. I will be leaving you after this meeting. It's been fun. But I'm moving on to other opportunities. Mr. Mitchell has resigned his position, and my understanding is that Mr. Wright is not intending or has not put in an application for his position. So get the word out there that we could use some interested parties who are willing to meet once a month and work on this and make sure the infrastructure for the city keeps moving along in a positive manner. You guys have done a great job. Thanks.
Mary's been on.
Thank you, Mary.
Mary's been on since 2005. Only beaten by Betty, I think, since 2000. Betty, I think so. And so, yeah.
Thank you, Mary, for your service.
Yes. So you got cookies. Help yourself to cookies.
2004.
And the meeting's adjourned. Have a cookie so Kathy doesn't have to take them home.